Hello everyone. I want to say thank you for coming out for this gathering today. I wish that I could have been with you, but unfortunately I have previous commitments. For those of you who may not know me, I am Pastor Michael Petrucci, and I am the pastor of Praise Assembly in Newark, Delaware. I also concurrently serve as a chaplain for the Northeast region of our Royal Rangers ministry. Steve Steffel has asked me to speak to you about Royal Rangers and its effectiveness as an evangelistic tool. And let me say from the very beginning today that I believe wholeheartedly that both Girls Ministries and Royal Rangers are the two single most effective outreach tools that any church can have. And I believe that our church leaders and our pastors need to have a greater appreciation for what these ministries are capable of doing in regards to church growth. And so with that in mind, I want to take the few minutes that I have with you to explain why I believe this. But first I need to admit to you that I'm sharing with you today, not from a statistical base, but rather from an anecdotal base. I don't have any empirical backing for what I'm going to suggest to you, but rather I'm sharing with you after 34 years of pastoral experience. And I want you to consider that there is truth in what I'm going to say. And so let me share a few observations that I have made, which I believe hold true for your situation as well as mine. If the church that you attend is the least bit similar to mine, if your experience is on par with mine, then you probably notice that very few unsaved adult visitors just walk into your church on any given Sunday. It is truly a rarity today for a complete stranger, an unsaved person, unchurched person, to decide to attend your church's Sunday morning worship service. And so unless the adults who are already attending your main worship service invite someone else, let's admit that there are just very few visitors attending on a Sunday morning. Now, if we contrast that scenario, the Sunday morning venue, with what happens in an even slightly active outpost during the midweek, you will notice that the family night activities draw all kinds of people compared to Sunday mornings. And this is because children have no problem with inviting friends to join them in another activity. Specifically, boys have no problem inviting other boys. I mean, they will bring their buddies from school, their friends from their neighborhood, even some of their relatives who may not yet know the Lord. And so I found that with a minimal amount of encouragement from us, they will invite their friends to attend with them. And then, of course, once their unsaved friends begin attending, I've noticed that these other unsaved boys rarely have a problem with receiving an offer of salvation. They are so very open. And then beyond this, if our program is any good at all, they will want to continue to be part of our Rangers ministry. And of course, the next step is how their parents will eventually become part of your church. And this can happen in at least one of two ways. First, the boy is incredibly excited, and so his parents start to attend the church out of curiosity to see what all the commotion is about. Or they may be the kind of parents who just want to get directly involved in your outpost as a helper, or maybe an extra driver for an event, possibly helping with a single event. Either way, you see, the connection to the unsaved adult begins through a boy or a young man who got invited to Rangers and ultimately to your church. There's simply no denying it. So that's what can happen through the regular weekly ministry of your Ranger program. Now, if you want to bring it up a notch and ensure that the parents step into your church, all you need to do is to hold your advancement ceremonies in front of the whole church population. And that's precisely what we do at Praise Assembly, at least twice a year. Once is as a Sunday evening service in the fall, and then once in the spring on a Wednesday night. And I cancel the adult midweek Bible study so that my own people know how important this special service really is. And in this way, visitors get a feel for what we're all about as a church. So that's my case for why every church that truly wants to grow needs to have an active Rangers outpost. It is an open door to the unchurched and the unsaved. It's a very friendly entry point for those who need Christ. Now, the other thing that I want to share with you today is this. There is a trend that I've noticed in some of our churches, and it deeply troubles me. There is a trend whereby some churches are trying to marginalize, or in some cases, neutralize the Ranger program in their church. And they do this by expanding their youth program. Many of our churches already have youth group meetings and Rangers all on the same evening. And so as a result, they lose out on the ability to have strong Expedition Ranger outposts. And basically because it's difficult for Ranger leaders to compete against youth group when it's on the same night. And the reason for this is obvious. It's simply because youth group will always have one thing that Rangers can never compete with. And that, of course, is girls. And yet, of course, the very strength of Rangers is that it is only for men and boys. Rangers is, after all, a ministry whereby boys can be mentored into becoming future men. It's a safe place where boys can learn all about becoming a responsible adult male. Sensitive topics can be discussed without the uneasiness of a mixed group. And this is why I believe the pastoral staff and the Ranger team must find a way to successfully exist together. There needs to be cooperation between the youth leader and the Ranger leadership. You know, sadly, I recently heard of a church that was actually trying to limit Rangers by extending youth group to pre-adolescent kids, younger kids. They were calling it pre-youth group. In other words, Rangers, Adventure Rangers, and even Discovery Rangers were facing competition from the new excitement of that youth ministry. And this was an actual concerted effort to diminish the Ranger program in that church. And that's sad. I've now pastored at my church for more than 14 years. And in my first months as pastor, as soon as I hired a youth pastor, the next thing that I did was to move our youth group to a completely separate night. The other thing that I did was include Rangers as part of my youth pastor's portfolio. And so to this day, our oldest group of boys is a strong group because they don't have to choose. They can do both. And the same is true of the girls. And how I wish that other pastors would also consider this move, because I believe that an expanded menu of ministries will draw more people. The more things that are offered, the more active your church is, the more likely different people will show up for different events and different ministries. And this is where you come in. You've got to convince your pastor that more adults and more families will join the church through Rangers than through youth group. You need to keep good records and make sure that you report to your pastor the connection between that new family that just showed up on Sunday morning and the boy who got saved on a previous Wednesday night. And keep a tally for the full year. How many new families have come into the church because of Rangers versus, let's say, youth group or even walking in off the street? You should be able to prove your case, and you need to share this with your pastor. Now, here's a caveat that I need to share with you. Your church's youth group may seem larger than your Ranger ministry. It may even seem to be growing faster. But understand that part of the reason for this is because there's probably a paid, part-time, or full-time youth pastor who's focusing all of his energy and budget on only that one ministry. He can give it much more attention than you can as a lay leader in the Ranger ministry of your church. So if you're lining up your raw numbers to the total youth group attendance, you may not look good most of the time. So here's a more worthy comparison. Try to calculate how many of the kids in youth group attend Sunday morning service or are responsible for getting their parents and family connected to your church. And what I've observed, and again, this is not firm empirical data, what I've observed is that a lot of outside kids attend our youth group, but they don't come to Sunday morning worship, and their parents don't get involved or interested in our church either. However, it's just the opposite with boys who are part of Rangers. Most parents outside of our church will be involved with their kids in some way, and here's why. It's for a very simple reason. Parents of younger Ranger age kids will always be more involved in support of their children. They'll have to help them with achievements. They'll need to buy snacks now and then to send along with their boys to his outpost. And more than likely, the boy relies on his own parent for a ride to get to Rangers. On the other hand, parents of teenagers want to give their kids, especially older teens, a sense of limited autonomy. And they will simply drop their teenagers off at a youth group. They won't feel such a responsibility to get involved as they would have with the Ranger program. Another issue is that some teens will come with another teen who has a license to drive. And so youth group will rarely have the same level of parental involvement that Royal Rangers requires. Now, in conclusion, our ministries and our churches are not meant to be in competition with each other. They really shouldn't be. And I don't want to give that perception. But I am challenging you to look at which ministries are most effective at reaching the lost. And I believe that it'll be Rangers and girls ministries every time. If these programs are administered properly by adequately trained leaders, they will attract the unsaved as well as the saved. And as you most likely are aware, people do vote with their feet. And they'll be part of anything that exudes excellence. So aim for excellence in your outpost. Be good enough that people won't have a choice but to be part of your ministry. And finally, if you want more of your pastor's support, show him how effective the Ranger ministry is at getting boys saved and their families becoming part of your church. You will win him as you win the lost. God bless you, and thank you for serving.